I've been having this feeling for a while now, and honestly, it's something I never thought I'd feel, especially towards him. But the truth is, what happened that day in the bathroom changed everything. You ever catch yourself feeling something you know you shouldn't? Like, deep down, you know it's some reason you can't stop yourself from thinking about it? That's exactly what was happening to me, and the last person I thought I'd feel it for was my best friend's son. I had known him practically his whole life. I watched him grow up, saw him change from a boy into a young man. But for the longest time, he was just that. My best friend's kid. Nothing more. He'd come around when I visited. Sometimes we'd talk or joke around, but I never thought much of it. Not until recently. Lately, I couldn't stop noticing how different he seemed. It wasn't just the way he looked, though he had grown up quite a bit. It was the way he acted around me. There was a certain confidence, a kind of maturity, that I hadn't seen before, and it was like he knew the effect he had on me. And I hated that I was even thinking about him in this way. At first, I thought it was just a weird phase, something that would pass if I ignored it. But the more time I spent around him, the more these feelings started creeping up on me. It felt wrong. This was my best friend's son, someone I'd known since he was a kid, but I couldn't deny it anymore. The attraction was there, and it was getting harder and harder to push it away. One weekend, I went over to my best friend's house like I usually did. She had asked me to help her with some things around the house, and she was getting ready for a family trip. Her son was there too, helping out. But my friend had to leave for an appointment, leaving just the two of us. It wasn't a big deal at first. We were just hanging out, talking as we worked. But there was this strange tension between us. It was subtle, almost like neither of us wanted to admit it was there. But I could feel it, and I knew he could too. The more we talked, the more aware I became of how he was looking at me. It wasn't like before, when he was just the kid I used to babysit. No, this was different. His eyes lingered on me a little too long, his smile a little too suggestive. And instead of feeling uncomfortable like I should have, I felt drawn to him. It was like every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to remember who he was and how wrong this all was. But I couldn't. I didn't want to. We kept talking, the conversation casual but laced with something unspoken. Every time I caught his gaze, there was a spark of something dangerous, something I wasn't ready to admit I wanted. Then, out of nowhere, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I needed a break, some distance to clear my head, because I could feel myself slipping into a situation I wasn't sure I could control. I splashed some water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was older. I was supposed to know better. He was my best friend's son. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the attraction. It was like something inside me had awakened, and now there was no way to put it back to sleep. As I stood there, trying to gather my thoughts, I heard a soft knock at the door. Before I could even answer, the door opened slightly, and there he was, standing in the doorway, his eyes locked on mine. My heart started racing. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain the look on my face. But he didn't say anything either. He just stood there, like he was waiting for me to make the first move. Time seemed to slow down. I knew I should have told him to leave, to walk away before things went any further. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen in place as he took a step closer. I could feel my pulse in my ears, the heat rising in my cheeks as the space between us grew smaller and smaller. He stepped into the bathroom, closing the door softly behind him. I should have stopped him right then. I should have told him this was wrong, that we couldn't do this. But the words wouldn't come. My mind was spinning, my body reacting to his presence in ways I couldn't control. He reached out, gently brushing his fingers against my arm, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I don't think we should, I whispered. But even as the words left my mouth, I didn't believe them. It felt like every inch of me was drawn to him, like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous, and all it would take was one small push to send me over. And then, in that moment, everything changed. He was so close now that I could feel his breath against my skin. My mind was racing with all the reasons why this was wrong, why I should step away, walk out, and never let this happen. But my body wasn't listening. It felt like I was caught in a whirlwind, one that I had no control over. The pull between us was so strong, it was almost magnetic. He didn't say anything, and neither did I. There was no need for words at that point. It was like we both knew exactly what was going on, but neither of us wanted to admit it out loud. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the things we weren't saying. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my chest, the air in the bathroom thick with tension. His hand brushed against mine, and it was such a small gesture, but it felt like everything. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I just stood there, frozen in the moment, as he slowly, almost hesitantly, reached for me again. His touch was gentle, like he was testing the waters, seeing if I'd push him away. But I didn't. I couldn't. A part of me wanted to stop this, to end it before it spiraled out of control, but another part of me didn't want to. I knew how dangerous this was, how close we were to crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But it didn't matter. In that moment, it was like everything else faded away. All the reasons why this was wrong, all the consequences of what could happen, they didn't seem to matter anymore. The only thing I could think about was him. His eyes, his touch, the way my body responded to his presence. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it didn't help. If anything, it only made the tension between us worse. It was like I was teetering on the edge, ready to fall into something I wasn't sure I could come back from. And then, he stepped even closer. His hand slid up my arm, sending shivers down my spine, and for a second I let myself lean into it. I let myself feel the warmth of his skin, the heat of the moment. I wanted it. I couldn't deny that anymore. I wanted him. But just as quickly as the thought crossed my mind, a wave of guilt crashed over me. This wasn't right. This wasn't just some random guy. This was my best friend's son. Someone I had known for years. Someone who trusted me. And if I let this go any further, I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life. I pulled back slightly, just enough to break the contact between us. He looked at me, confused, his eyes searching mine for some kind of answer, some explanation for why I had stopped. And for a moment, I thought about just letting it happen. I thought about giving in to the temptation and letting myself fall into whatever this was. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. We can't, I said softly, barely able to get the words out. This isn't right. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his hand still hovering near mine, as if he was waiting for me to change my mind. But I couldn't. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't let this happen. I took a step back, putting some distance between us, and the moment felt like it shattered. The tension, the heat, everything that had been building up between us, it all came crashing down. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, the confusion, and it made my chest tighten with guilt. But I knew this was the right thing to do. I had to stop this before it went any further, before we did something we could never take back. I'm sorry, I whispered, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. For almost letting it happen? For feeling the way I did? For not being able to stop the attraction I knew was wrong? He finally took a step back too, his expression shifting from confusion to something softer, something almost understanding. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes told me that he knew deep down that this was for the best. As much as we both might have wanted it, we couldn't let it happen. Not like this. There was a long, awkward silence between us, and I could feel the weight of everything that had just almost happened hanging in the air. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to make it less awkward, how to go back to pretending like I didn't feel this way. But before I could say anything, he finally spoke. I understand, he said quietly, his voice low but steady. It's okay. I nodded, though I didn't really feel okay about any of it. The truth was, I didn't know what to do with these feelings. I didn't know how to move past them, how to go back to the way things were before. But at least now I knew I had to try. I couldn't let this attraction control me, couldn't let it ruin everything. I should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't stay in that bathroom any longer, not with him standing so close. Not with everything that had just almost happened still fresh in my mind. He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, stepping aside to let me pass, and I felt a pang of something. Regret, maybe? As I walked past him and out of the bathroom. My heart was still racing, my mind spinning with everything that had just unfolded, but I knew I had made the right choice. I had to get out of there before things went any further. before I did something I couldn't take back. As I left the house, I couldn't stop thinking about what had almost happened, about how close we had come to crossing that line. And as much as I tried to push the thoughts away, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped it. If I had let myself give in to the temptation, to the feelings I'd been trying so hard to ignore. But deep down, I knew the answer. It would have been a mistake that could have cost me my friendship, my peace of mind, and everything else I held dear. And as much as I hated the tension between us, I knew I had made the right choice by walking away. For days after, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the bathroom, replaying it over and over in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, felt the pull between us, and it drove me crazy. But with each passing day, I also felt the weight of what I almost did. The reality of how close I came to crossing that line hit me harder than I expected. I avoided my best friend's house for a while, trying to distance myself from the situation. But no matter how much space I put between us, the memory still lingered. I knew that I had to get a grip on my feelings. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my friendship, about the people who trusted me. And I couldn't let a moment of weakness destroy all of that. Eventually, I saw him again. This time, things were different. The tension was still there, but it wasn't the same. I had made my choice. I knew that whatever attraction I felt wasn't worth ruining everything. We didn't talk about what happened, and I could tell that he had moved on too. As hard as it was, I knew I had made the right decision. Some lines just aren't meant to be crossed. And while part of me would always wonder what might have happened if I hadn't stopped, I also knew that walking away was the only choice I could live with.